Hey, what's up? It's Wick for Xiaomify, and today we're looking at the all-new Poco M3 Pro. It's only been 6 months since we've seen the Poco M3, but now we have the Poco M3 Pro 5G. So let's have a look at how good this thing really is and if it's really that pro as the box claims it is. Let's go. So here it is. In the box we know what to expect. We've got a SIM card ejector tool, some instructions, some Poco stickers, a basic protective case. Below that we'll find the Poco M3 Pro itself, and below that a USB-C cable and a 22 watts wall plug. The M3 Pro is 161 by 75 by 8.9 millimeters in size, weighing in at 190 grams. On the front, it's got a 6.5-inch Full HD Plus display with a 2400 by 1080 pixels resolution and a 90 Hz refresh rate that's got a brightness of up to 500 nits. Here you'll also find its dot-designed front-facing camera with an aperture of f2, which has an 8-megapixel resolution. On the back you'll find its kinda 3-camera setup with a 48-megapixel main camera with an aperture of f1.8, a 2-megapixel depth sensor, and a 2-megapixel macro lens. So really it's just one camera. On the inside, it's got a 5000 mAh battery that supports 18 watts fast charging, a Mediatek Dimensity 700 processor that supports 5G connectivity. It's got up to 6 gigs of DDR4 RAM and up to 128 gigs of UFS 2.2 storage, and it's got NFC. It's got a SIM card slot with micro SD card slot to expand its internal storage. On the side, we'll find the volume rockers and the power button, which also functions as the fingerprint scanner for unlocking. On the bottom, it's got the USB-C port and the speaker, and on top you'll find a 3.5mm headphone jack and IR blaster to use the phone as a remote controller. So first, let's look at the camera. So here's some photos I've taken with the 48-megapixel main camera during the day. I've had this phone for about a week and I've been shooting some photos around the block with some nice sunlight, as you can see here, and the photos with sunlight come out, well, alright. I did have some photos where it had some problems finding the right exposure, and I've had some blown out parts of these images that were overexposed. I've had that on quite a few photos actually, as you can see right here. I also had some rainy days, and these photos come out looking a bit less spectacular. You can also notice that there's already a little bit of noise in some of these images. Especially when we zoom into 100%, you can see that there's quite a lot of noise already. And talking about noise, at night when it gets darker, the images get very noisy and lose a lot of detail. I've had a few lucky shots, kind of, and these come out somewhat okay, but the shutter speed slows down significantly, so there's quite some motion blur in some of these, and you can find a lot of artifacts in these night shots as well as a lot of noise. Then we have a video on the M3 Pro. Unfortunately, the video isn't all that pro, as it only shoots HD video, and sure, these come out looking quite okay during the day, especially when it's very sunny. So especially when there's sunlight, they're not too bad. However, when it gets darker, the video is very mushy, it gets very noisy, and it's just not that great. Then we've got a macro lens. Nothing really spectacular, but it does allow you to shoot videos using the macro lens in case you want that. Then we have the front-facing camera that takes selfies. This is pretty much the same type of performance as on the M3. Sure, it seems to be a little bit better, but really nothing spectacular here. Also, video with this one isn't the most spectacular. During the day, it's not all that bad, but at night it does get mushy and very noisy. So how is the M3 Pro in use? Well, the Poco M3 Pro comes with MIUI 12 with that Poco launcher. So this gives it slightly more of a stock Android feel, mixed with a flavor of Xiaomi's MIUI. It does come with all the Google apps pre-installed, including the Google Play Store, and it actually doesn't have that much bloatware pre-installed, which is good. And how it is in use really depends on what type of user you are. it's surely not the best experience that I've seen from Xiaomi, or Poco in this case. And it's not the fastest phone, and it surely doesn't have the brightest screen either. At times it really felt like the phone is a little bit sluggish, doesn't really respond that quick. It feels like there's a little bit of a drag or like a delay on it. Sure, for some daily Facebook browsing, some Instagram scrolling, or just watching some YouTube, it's just fine. I even played some PUBG on it, which did work, although you don't want this to run on its highest settings. When on slightly lower settings, it's not too bad and I managed to actually play, although not the best experience I've ever had, it was playable. One of the bigger downsides is the screen, which can really dim quite a bit. On some occasions, it was almost impossible to see anything when I was outside, so sure, it is a higher refresh rate, as I can set it to 90 Hz here in the settings, but it's not all that bright. Then the audio, how is that? Well, the audio wasn't that spectacular on the M3 Pro. It doesn't feature the dual speaker setup that even the M3 actually had, so it's not as immersive of an audio experience. So here's just some music playing out of the speaker, although, well, you be the judge of it. The microphone is pretty much what we would expect. So here's an audio recording of the M3 Pro. Hey, what's up? It's Wick for Xiaomify, and this is what I sound like through the Poco M3 Pro. Let's go. So the audio isn't all that great. The microphone is acceptable, I guess, but the speaker didn't really do it for me. The M3 Pro does have a few notable changes from the Poco M3. The Mediatek Dimensity is quite a bit better than the Snapdragon 662 that we found on the M3, and it supports 5G. That's something that you might be looking for. Seeing it also comes with a 6GB RAM version, that surely is an upgrade from the M3 as well. It's supposed to have a slightly upgraded camera, which is not notable or noticeable in terms of a change. It's got a 90 Hz display, which is definitely better than the M3, and it's supposed to be a little bit brighter, but I really couldn't tell that either. It's also got a smaller battery compared to the M3, which really had an amazing battery. It did last quite well, even though it's got a 90 Hz display, so I'm not really complaining about the battery, but generally, how do I feel about the M3 Pro? Well, it is a little bit of an upgrade of the M3, but it's also somewhat of a downgrade. The lacking dual speakers and the smaller battery are surely being missed. The fact that the camera is pretty much the same as the M3, and that it's basically just the refresh rate of the display and the processor with the RAM that are making this the quote-unquote Pro version is somewhat disappointing. The Poco M3 is coming out as a 64GB version with 4GB of RAM and 128GB of storage and 6GB of RAM. I've put down some links below this video in case you want to go and check it out. Anyway, generally I am not blown away with the M3 Pro. It's not that good, even considering its price category. Sure, if you just need a phone to use it for some WhatsApp or Line, maybe just some Facebook Messenger and a little bit of browsing, and you don't need to play games, you don't need a really good camera, you just want to send out some emails, then this could be a nice phone for you. But if you do happen to be somewhat more of a power user, then this phone is probably not going to be for you. And you might want to consider saving up a few months more and look at something like the Redmi Note 10 Pro, which, sure, it is a bit of a higher price tag, but if you save a few months more, I think it might be a better choice that will probably outlive this M3 Pro. So what do you guys think of the M3 Pro 5G? I mean, the 5G part is true, it definitely has 5G. The Pro part, I'm not so sure about. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below this video, and if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, know that you probably should. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see y'all soon. Peace!